Welcome to the Implementing CDBG webinar series presented by the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority, also known as CDFA. My name is Ed Geiger, and the topic for this module is Monitoring and Closeout. You can download a copy of the PowerPoint slides for this webinar from the CDFA website for your reference. Let's get started. The purpose of monitoring is to review grantee and project performance, assure compliance and identify corrective actions if needed, as well as identify technical assistance needs that may be required. This module will briefly discuss monitoring the closeout process, as well as change of use requirements that extend to the project even after your grant contract expires. Monitoring is not a one-time event. To be an effective tool for avoiding problems and improving performance, monitoring must be an ongoing process. CDFA undertakes monitoring checks at multiple stages of a project's implementation, not just when conducting a formal monitoring site visit. Grantee compliance is checked and documentation is reviewed to determine whether program requirements are being met whenever a grantee requests a payment draw or submits environmental review certifications or requests ER approvals. CDFA reviews semi-annual progress reports and considers project-related communication to assure compliance. And finally, CDFA examines performance when approving closeout documentation. This slide summarizes the steps for formal monitoring site visits. The initial step of scheduling the visit will include a list of files and documentation that will be provided by CDFA to the grantee to be reviewed during the site visit. When the visit starts, there will be an entrance meeting with the grantee and appropriate administrators to discuss the steps CDFA staff will follow in conducting the monitoring review. This will include an opportunity for the grantee to discuss its project status and any issues. CDFA staff will ask the grantee and local administrators about concerns or needs that may require additional technical assistance in managing the project. CDFA staff will review documentation using appropriate checklists to determine program compliance. Record keeping is the most important component of monitoring. Files should be available for review at the site visit location. If not, CDFA will request to receive them after the site visit. The outcome of the site visit will be a monitoring letter that identifies findings and concerns. Findings are items or actions that are not in compliance with federal statutes or regulations. These can result in punitive actions. CDFA will indicate a corrective action that the grantee must complete. Concerns are also included in the monitoring letter. Any deficiency in program performance not based on a statutory, regulatory, or other program requirement is a concern. These are matters that, if not properly addressed, may become a finding. Corrective actions are not required for concerns, but CDFA may recommend actions. The grantee must respond in writing to the monitoring letter within 30 days regarding any findings in that letter. The grantee must describe all corrective actions taken or planned to be undertaken, consistent with the recommendations made by CDFA in the monitoring letter. If issues are not addressed, CDFA may take other punitive actions up to and including termination or repayment of the grant. Moving on to briefly highlight sub-recipient monitoring, grantees need to understand that they are responsible for project performance and compliance, even if sub-recipients administer a CDBG grant. Consequently, grantees should provide some level of oversight. Given the number of changes occurring with CDFA's updated implementation manual, CDFA will provide some flexibility in imposing this requirement during the transition in order to institute the many other changes. CDFA will continue to ensure the appropriate administration of CDBG funds, whether by grantee or subrecipient. At the same time, grantees are encouraged to increase their efforts to provide oversight, which can be informed by the guidance on sub-recipient monitoring provided in the implementation guide. This and the next slide are an informal checklist of items to determine whether you're ready to initiate the closeout process. Check that all costs for the project have been incurred or obligated, including final audit if necessary. Make sure all semi-annual reports were submitted and accepted by CDFA, and confirm that monitoring findings, if any, have been resolved according to CDFA's review and instructions. If you had any prior financial audit findings involving CDBG, provide documentation from your CPA that those findings were resolved. Be sure that you held at least one public hearing, the mid-grant hearing, during project implementation. And finally, confirm that all responsibilities under the contract were fulfilled, including any special conditions to the satisfaction of CDFA. Once you accomplish those 6 checklist items, you can then proceed to close out your grant by first, completing the closeout certification and documentation form. Be sure that the authorized official signs it and send it to CDFA. Second, complete the financial management component in CDFA's Grants Management System, GMS. Once CDFA approves the closeout certification, you will receive a closeout agreement. Sign it and return it. So you're done, right? No. Be sure to adhere to the record retention policy. Retain all records for 3 years after CDFA closes out the program year with HUD. This date is not the same as your closeout agreement. 3 years beyond the closeout date with HUD could actually extend 5 or more years beyond the end of your project. Check with CDFA if you are not certain about the closeout date with HUD for the applicable program year. Also, one last important issue may arise even after your grant contract is closed out and the agreement signed. There are restrictions on potential changes to any property that was assisted or that benefited from the CDBG funds. Those restrictions prohibit any change of use for the property in the 5 years following receipt of your closeout agreement. Those restrictions apply if any real property was acquired or improved and greater than $250,000 of CDBG funds was used for that property. If the grantee does not own the property, real estate encumbrances such as deed restrictions or liens should be imposed to restrict such changes after the project is complete. If a change of use is ever required or sought during that 5-year period, these are the steps to follow. The grantee must provide public notice and an opportunity for comment on the possible change of use. The change of use can be permitted if the local government deems the new use as appropriate and the new use meets another CDBG national objective, or CDBG funds are repaid to CDFA. That concludes our presentation on monitoring and closeout. Should you have any questions, please contact a CDFA program manager using the contact information on this slide.